Welcome to Tax Ladder. Today we're going to look at three very important chapters. One, assessment and audit. Two, inspection, search and seizure. Three, demands and recovery. So this is going to be a very interesting and very important session for us. So let us start quickly. My name is Shivakant and I'm a chartered accountant. Let us move forward. First, we're going to look at what are the types of assessments. What are the types of assessments available? First, it is the provisional assessment. So when can provisional assessment under 60 be adopted? It can be adopted when the application to be made in case value cannot be determined, rate of tax cannot be determined. What does this mean? So let us say, take any product for that matter. I need to determine what is the tax payable by me. What is the information I need? I need two things, right? I need to know what is the value of the product that I'm selling and what is the rate of tax. If both of these are not there, I cannot determine the tax, because on the value I apply rate, then I get the tax amount. So if those two crucial information is not available, then I opt for a provisional assessment. So that is what he says. Section 60 says we can opt for provisional assessment when value cannot be determined, rate of tax cannot be determined. What can be a situation where I cannot determine the value or rate? Let us say the value is contingent. It depends on a certain event happening. Like the value of gold will be 1 month from now, or I do not know what the value of gold would be. So I make an application for provisional assessment as per section 60. Even if I'm unable to determine the rate of tax, so let us say there is a dispute regarding whether this product has to be classified under 18% or 12%. So that is the dispute that is going on. But very soon a court judgment is awaited by the Telangana High Court saying that this is the rate applicable for this product. So in that case also I will make an application for provisional assessment, because I cannot wait till that time when the court gives a decision. So I make an application for provisional assessment. So once I make a provisional assessment, the proper officer shall pass an order accepting payment of tax on provisional basis after furnishing a security along with a bond. The order shall indicate, now the proper officer shall pass an order indicating the amount of tax that needs to be paid by me. He will also tell me what is the security that I need to give him. I will execute a bond saying that, what is a bond? Bond is nothing but a written affidavit saying that I will pay any further tax in the future if it is determined that tax needs to be paid by me in future. If so, that is the bond or writing or declaration I give. Along with that, I also give a security. What is the value of the security that I give? Equivalent to the amount in excess of the provisional assessment that is estimated by the proper officer, which is required to be paid in the future. Let us say the proper officer determines that maybe the value at maximum could be 1.5 lakhs, but now he is putting the value at 1 lakh. So the additional 50,000, the maximum that he thinks the value could increase to, on that differential amount he will ask me to give a guarantee. That is also something he can ask. So what does the order indicate? The value on which assessment is to be allowed, all right, the amount for which bond is to be executed, the security to be furnished not exceeding 25% of the amount covered under bond. So the amount of bond will give me the differential amount, a declaration that I will pay the differential amount when it becomes due, along with the security equal to 25% of the amount covered by the bond. So the final assessment is to be done within 6 months of communication of order of provisional assessment. Interest 18% payable from the due date till the actual date of payment, or 6% from the end of 60 days from the date of application in case of refund receivable. So once the provisional order is issued, the final assessment should be made within 6 months of the date of receipt of the provisional assessment order along with interest. Interest is also required to be paid at the rate of 18% under section 50 subsection 1, as we've already discussed, from the due date. So let us say this month the transaction happened, I need to pay tax by 20th of next month. So the due date for payment of tax is 20th of next month. I make a provisional assessment today, I receive an order today. So from the due date for making payment, which is 20th of next month, I have to pay interest till the date of actual payment on final assessment. Till the actual date of payment on the final assessment. 6% from the end of 60 days from the date of application in case of refund receivable. So if I need to get amount, so I paid excess on provisional assessment. Now I need to get a refund from the government. So that refund will have a lower rate, obviously. It will have 6% interest, from which rate, not the due date of making payment, it is 60 days from the date of making an application for refund. From that day onwards, refund interest will start counting. But this is unfair, but that is how it is. So the RFD one, let us say the final assessment order is issued, and in that a refund is determined by the final assessment order. I make a refund application, let us say immediately next day. So 60 days after the date of making a refund application, the interest of 6% starts getting counted. Whereas in the reverse case, when I need to get money, the interest should be counted way back when the tax is actually required to be paid by me. So this is completely U-turn this is. So what is this? The time limit for closure of final assessment can be extended by a further period of 6 months by the joint commissioner or additional commissioner. It can be extended by a period of 4 years by the commissioner. Right? This final assessment can be extended by a further period of 6 months. So that means in total 1 year. It can be extended for a further period of 4 years with the prior permission of the commissioner, if he feels that there are actual reasons for that. Order for release of security to be issued within 7 working days of receipt of application. Now once the final assessment order is passed, I must have given a guarantee, right, equal to 25% of the bond executed. So that guarantee that has been furnished has to be released. So within 7 days, order for release will be issued. I have to make a separate application for release of the guarantee furnished by me. Apart from the application for provisional assessment, I have to make a separate application when the final assessment order is passed for release of the security furnished by me. So once an application for release of guarantee or security is made, it has to be adhered to within 7 working days of receipt of application. Now let us go to section 61. What is this? Now this is a scrutiny. As we have a scrutiny in income tax 143 subsection 2, we have a scrutiny assessment in goods and services tax as well. The proper officer may select for scrutiny a return furnished by the registered person. Issue a show cause notice asking for a reply within 30 days of communication quantifying the amount. Now the proper officer, the registered person, gives a clarification within the prescribed time. The scrutiny shall be based on information available with him. If he is satisfied with the reply, the proper officer shall inform him that no further action shall be taken. No, he shall conduct an audit under 65. The proper officer, or he will direct a person to conduct an audit, direct a special audit by a chartered accountant or cost accountant, undertake inspection, search and seizure, initiate proceedings and determine tax under 73-74. So what is this? So if he has reasons to believe, man, based on the information available with him, let us say I furnished a return for 5 crores for a month. He has reasons, let us say it is, I'm making a supply to the government entity, let us say National Mineral Development Corporation or BSNL. So this being a government undertaking, it needs to deduct TDS, on the GST. So TDS is deducted, so that value is amounting to 10 crores, but I've only shown 5 crores in my return. So this would be information available with him. Based on the information available with him, he issues a scrutiny notice. He will select me for scrutiny, and he will issue a show cause notice to me. So he will ask me, give me a reply within 30 days. If I give a reply within 30 days, he is satisfied, then no further action will be taken. If he is not satisfied, then he will ask for an audit under section 65. So this is a departmental audit conducted by the department. Or he will direct a special audit to be conducted by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, depending on the complexity of the business or nature of transaction. If it feels that a professional is required for conduct of audit, he exercises section 66. Or he will directly go for inspection, search and seizure under section 67, or initiate proceedings under 70. He will issue a notice under 73 asking, there is tax non-payment, short payment because of willful misstatement, suppression of facts, collusion, give me a reply. So this is something you can do. This is an initial filter, as we can say. 1662, non-filing of returns. What does this mean? If a person fails to file returns under 39, that is nothing but GSTR 3B, or a final return under section 45. So who needs to file a final return? A person who is opting for cancellation of registration. So before the cancellation is effective, he needs to file a final return declaring all his closing stock and all. So if that does not happen, he will issue a notice under section 46, and after failing to furnish the return within 15 days, pass an assessment order determining tax liability to the best of his judgment based on the information available with him. The time limit to pass the order is 5 years from the due date of furnishing annual return. So what does this mean, man? So if a taxpayer has not furnished GSTR 3B for a certain period, let us say 1 year, there is no period specified here. Normally a notice is issued under section 46 saying that you have not filed your GSTR 3B, please file within 15 days. If no return is filed, then he will pass an assessment order. So if he has not filed the returns, he has not given a reply to the notice issued saying that you have not filed returns, only then an order will be passed. He will pass an order assessing the tax payable by him to the best of his judgment based on information available with him. The time limit to pass the order is 5 years from the due date for furnishing annual return. The time limit to pass the order is 5 years from due date for furnishing annual return under 44. For the financial year 17-18, the due date was February 2020. So within 5 years from the due date for furnishing annual return, he can pass an order. So after 5 years from the expiry of February 2020, so there's a lot of time now, he cannot give me a notice saying that you have not filed the returns, I will determine your tax to the best of my judgment. He cannot say that because it is time barred. His time is over. He can only do this within a certain period of time. So what is section 62 ultimately summarizing this? So if he has not filed returns and he has received a notice under 46 saying that you have not filed returns, please give me a reply. Even to that he has not replied. Then what is he going to do? He will pass an order assessing or determining tax to the best of his judgment based on the information available with him, and this has to be done within 5 years from the due date for furnishing annual return under section 44. Understood? So assessment of unregistered persons. So what if I need to be registered, I do not register myself. A taxable person fails to get himself registered, or a person whose registration has been cancelled under 29 subsection 2, but who is required to pay tax under the act, the proper officer may proceed to assess the tax payable to the best of his judgment. Before passing an assessment order, he shall be served a notice giving grounds to which a reply is to be furnished within 15 days. The time limit to pass an order is 5 years from the due date of furnishing annual return for the financial year to which the payment relates. So what does this mean? If a person does not register himself, even though his turnover exceeds 20 lakhs or 50 lakhs, whatever the turnover limit for that person is, if he does not register himself, so the proper officer will assess the tax. So let us say for one whole year I need to get registered, but I did not register. The proper officer shall determine the tax payable by him for that whole 1 year, the period for which he needs to register himself. He will assess the tax to the best of his judgment. Before passing an assessment order, there has to be a compulsorily an opportunity of being heard. That is the principle of natural justice. So before passing the assessment order, a notice shall be served giving the grounds of assessment to which the reply is to be furnished within 15 days. So I will issue a notice saying that, so this is the reason I believe that you need to register yourself and you did not register. That is why I have determined the tax that is payable by you to be so and so 10-20 lakhs. So give me a reply within 15 days. The time limit to pass the order is 5 years from the due date for furnishing an annual return for the year to which non-payment relates. Alright, if he is satisfied with the reply, then the proceedings will be dropped. So this is just a carbon copy of section 62. If he is not filing returns, one procedure is followed. The same you substitute it to 63. If a person who is required to register has not registered himself, the proper officer, based on the information available with him, determine the tax payable to the best of his judgment and pass an order. Alright, that order has to be passed within 5 years from the due date for furnishing annual return under section 44. Alright. Section 64, summary assessment. What is a summary assessment? With the prior permission of the additional or joint commissioner, the proper officer, if it is in the interest of the revenue, shall pass a summary assessment order. He has evidence that the taxable person has incurred liability of tax is payable by such person. He has reasons to believe that delay in passing the assessment order may adversely affect the interest of the revenue. So the proper officer, who is a proper officer? A proper officer is an officer entrusted with a particular function. So some person needs to carry on that assessment, or some person is looking at the checking of e-way bills in transit, right? So that proper officer is an officer designated by the commissioner or someone else to carry out that function. So he is a proper officer. For that function, he is the officer. Alright. So the proper officer can go for summary assessment only with prior permission of the JC or additional commissioner. So with prior permission, he can go for a summary assessment if he feels that it is in the interest of the revenue. So if he feels that if I do not pass an assessment order now, the department, the GST department, will lose so much of tax. So if that is the situation, if the interest of revenue is at stake, then I need to carry out a summary assessment. He has evidence that the taxable person has incurred a liability. So for this to happen, he has to have evidence that the taxable person, the person who needs to register himself or who has registered, he needs to pay tax, or he has reasons to believe that delay in passing the order may adversely affect the revenue. So if there is delay in passing assessment order which may adversely affect the revenue, even in that case, he may pass a summary assessment order. Alright, the summary assessment order may be withdrawn by the additional or joint commissioner. Assessment order is just a quick remedy so that at this moment the revenue does not escape. An order is passed, I feel that this guy will escape, or there is a need to do this urgently, so I carry out the assessment. I need to intimate him of this amount due. Otherwise, he would sell his properties off, he would use all his assets off and transfer it to someone else. So if it does come to recovery, even though there is a recovery measure which says that if you transfer off your properties on the initiation of proceedings, then the transfer is void. So this is the proceeding that I am initiating now. Understand? So this is the proceeding that I am initiating. I have to tell him, once the intimation goes, then he is caught. So he gives a summary assessment. If he has evidence that the person has incurred a liability, he has reasons to believe that delay in passing order may adversely affect the interest of the revenue. This has to be done with the prior permission of the additional or joint commissioner. So he can withdraw the summary assessment order. If an application for withdrawal, so the taxpayer responds within 30 days of receipt of the summary assessment order, he gives a valid reply to my summary assessment order and grounds. So I am satisfied with that. So I withdraw my summary assessment order. One more thing I can do is, so I can do that on my own motion. If I feel that there really is no need to pass this order, I come to know that within 30 days. So I can withdraw it myself, and if I really have that kind of doubt, I can go for section 73, 74 proceedings. 73 and 74 we'll discuss now, where a taxable person to whom the tax liability pertains is not ascertainable in respect of supply of goods, then the person in charge of the goods shall be deemed to be a taxable person liable to be assessed. Taxable person to whom liability pertains is not ascertainable in respect of supply of goods, and the person in charge shall be deemed to be the taxable person. I am unable to ascertain the person in charge of the goods. I just seized the goods. So I am unable to trace out who the owner of the goods is. So the person in charge will be treated as the person responsible to pay tax in that case. Understood? Taxable person liable to be assessed. This could happen even when the goods are intercepted in transit and the proper officer there feels that, so these goods are being transported without permission, or with an intent to evade tax. In that case, a summary assessment order can also be passed. So once I'm unable to find the real owner, I will pass the person in charge of the goods, the person in charge of the conveyance shall be treated as the person, or shall be treated as taxable person, and all the proceedings shall be initiated against him. Right, audit by authorities. Now the commissioner or any person authorized by commissioner by general or specific order may conduct the audit at place of business of the registered person or at his office for any financial year or part thereof or multiples thereof. So if the commissioner or any person authorized by him by a general or specific order, there has to be the commissioner involved. Either he has to do it himself, or he has to authorize someone, some officer subordinate to him, be it the joint, additional, deputy, assistant, to conduct the audit. So this can be conducted at the place of business of the registered person or at the premises of the commissioner or person authorized by him. A notice shall be sent at least 15. So at least 15 days before the date of audit, the notice says, I will conduct an audit on so and so date. So that gap should be at least 15 days. He shall verify what will he do in the audit. The books of accounts and records and the documents based on which books are maintained and returns are furnished. The correctness of exemptions claimed, rate of tax, ITC availed, deductions claimed, observations in his audit notes. And record the observations in the audit notes. The registered person. So what will he verify? The basic things. When any person, if you are going for an audit, what will you check? The books of accounts and records will be checked. How will I know whether the books and accounts are correct? Documents evidencing the books is which will give me the correctness of the books of accounts. So I will look here the books of accounts and records and the documents evidencing the correctness of these. Alright, that is one thing. I will verify the correctness of the exemptions claimed. What is the GST officer concerned about? Only the revenue point of view and ITC. The rest of the things he really does not care. So from a revenue point of view, is this exempt supply that I've shown is really exempt? Is the ITC availed correct, or is there any excess ITC claim? Alright, is the rate of tax correct? Is the abatement or some deductions claim correct? So that is the only thing, right, that I am concerned about. So that is what he'll check, and he will make notes. He'll take a record and note the observations during the audit. The registered person shall. So it is the response. So now we've talked of what the person or proper officer going for audit will do. Now we'll look at the responsibilities of the person whose books are being audited. He has to cooperate, right? He has to facilitate the verification of accounts or records available or requisitioned by the authorities. So this he has to do. He has to facilitate the verification of accounts or records. So if he asks for something, he has to produce those, to provide such information as the authorities may require, to facilitate verification. So give the officer all the tools. He needs a book, give a book. He needs a pen, give a pen, to facilitate the verification. To verify what is it he needs a system, give him a system. So all the tools that are required for him to conduct the audit, you give him. That is the first one. To provide such information as he may require. To render assistance for timely, you should not delay the giving of information, so that he has a time limit within which he has to complete the audit. You have to give him within the time whatever he wants. The proper officer shall inform the discrepancies notice, and the registered person shall furnish a reply, and after consideration of reply fine. So once an audit is conducted, an audit report has to be issued. On conclusion of the audit, the proper officer shall within 30 days inform the registered person whose records are audited about the findings, rights and obligations. On conclusion of audit, the proper officer shall within 30 days inform the registered person the findings, rights and obligations. So within 30 days, so I give him an opportunity of being heard. After considering his representations, I will finalize the audit, and I will intimate within 30 days whose records are audited the findings. Now if tax is payable as per the audit report, then I will continue to proceed as per section 73 or section 74. Now let us look at special audit. So proceedings before any officer not below the rank of assistant commissioner, he may, after considering the nature and complexity of the case, where value has not been declared correctly, credit is not within normal limits, he may, with the prior approval of commissioner, require his books of accounts be examined by a chartered accountant as nominated by the commissioner. A report to be submitted to the assistant commissioner within 90 days. So what does this mean? So considering a person not below the rank of assistant commissioner, below the assistant commissioner level, no one can even think of conducting a special audit. So even this assistant commissioner or the person above, he has to obtain prior permission of the commissioner for conduct of a special audit, considering if he is unable to determine the value, if he feels that the credit is not within the limits, only for these two reasons he can ask for a special audit. The valuation is not correct. The rest of the things, if he has doubt, he has to do it himself. No special audit. Only for he has doubtful valuation or the ITC he feels that has been availed beyond the limits. Only for these two reasons, let us say if he feels that the tax rate has been wrongly used. He cannot opt for special audit. He has to do that finding himself. So now he can ask a chartered accountant or cost accountant. The commissioner himself will prescribe who the CA or CMA will be, and he will conduct the audit of books of accounts and records. So report should be submitted to the assistant commissioner. So this report is directed to the, even though the commissioner appointed the auditor, the report will be given to the assistant commissioner within 90 days of what? 90 days of receipt of communication to conduct the audit, or 90 days of closure of audit. So the period can be extended by a further period of 90 days. The registered person shall be given an opportunity of being heard in respect of material gathered which is proposed to be used against him. Where a special audit results in deduction of tax not paid, short paid, then 7374 proceedings will be initiated. So ultimately, special audit and departmental audit under section 65. So department, both are just similar. In case of 66, only if there is complexity which the proper officer cannot do, like valuation rules, he needs to have a clear idea. Maybe a chartered accountant will have a better understanding. That is why he will give the job to him. In case of a departmental audit, it is the same. The procedure is the same. They will verify the books of accounts. In both the cases, the commissioner has to give the approval. Look at inspection, search and seizure. So what is inspection, man? When will an inspection happen? Section 65 is a departmental audit. Section 66 is a special audit. And now we are coming to an inspection. Who can conduct an inspection and what is it? The proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner shall authorize in writing any officer if he has reasons to believe. So this is crucial. He has reasons to believe that what? He has suppressed the transactions of supply of goods or services or both, or he has suppressed stock of goods. If he has claimed excess input credit, he has contravened with the provisions of the act, or if he is a transporter of goods or a person owning or maintaining a warehouse has kept the goods which has evaded tax, or kept goods or maintained books in such a manner to evade tax. So these are the situations where an inspection can be done by an officer not below the rank of joint commissioner. So then what will he do? He will either do it himself, he will inspect the place of business of the taxable person or the person engaged in the business of transport of goods, or he will, he has suppressed transactions of supply of goods, or he has not shown it, or he has suppressed the stock. He has stock in hand but he has not shown it. That is not accounted for in his books or GST returns. What matters to me most is the GST returns. It has not been accounted when it is not shown in the 3B. When a sale has not been shown in the 3B. That is what I am most concerned with. So he has claimed excess credit or he has contravened with the provisions of the act. If I have reasons to believe that, so in case of a warehouse operator, owner, or a person who is owning and maintaining a warehouse, or a transporter, what are the offenses that he could commit? So he is holding goods which have evaded tax. That can be one thing he can do. He has kept the books of accounts. Let us say he is maintaining the records of inward and outward, that has the goods coming in and out of the godown, but he is wantedly he's wantedly missing some information because he does not want those goods to be recorded, but those are in the godown. So if I have reasons to believe that that is happening, then the joint commissioner or a person authorized by him can conduct an inspection at the place of business of the taxable person or person engaged in the business of transport of goods, or a person who is owning and maintaining a warehouse. Understood? This is what inspection is. If I should have reasons to believe that these things are happening, so that concrete reason has to be there before I go and search, go for an inspection. So search and seizure. If proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner So the joint commissioner is crucial here in inspections, but for a departmental audit and a special audit, the commissioner was the main person. But for inspection, search and seizure, I am giving the powers to the joint commissioner and above, not below. Alright, if the proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner has reasons to believe that goods have evaded tax, books, documents and things relevant to any proceedings have been secreted. So why am I searching, man? Why am I? There is something I want to find, right? I will search to find something. If I have reasons to believe, what is there? What am I finding? Goods that have evaded tax, books, documents relevant to proceedings have been secreted. So let us say some fraud notice, willful misstatement notice has been issued, or it's 7374. But I really don't have concrete evidence. For that, I need to search the premises of that guy. In respect of any proceedings, this guy has secreted the documents. A 74 proceeding is going on, but I really don't have the evidence to prove that there is willful misstatement, suppression of facts or collusion. So then what I will do is I will go for a search. And I will try to get those documents. So that is what this is. Goods which have evaded tax or books, documents relevant to proceedings have been secreted. I will issue an order in written to search the place of business. Alright. He can issue the order of seizure containing the list of goods, documents and things seized separately. The goods can be released provisionally. So this is a seizure. So what is the search, man? Search is still this. So once I'm conducting the search, I have power to break open any almirah, lock or any whatever thing you call it. Forcefully I can break open an almirah. I can just seize off the premises itself where it contains goods, documents and things. I cannot break open the almirah if he is cooperating. I just cannot break everything. Only if he is non-cooperative and is not willing to open the almirah, I have to break open. I just cannot just break everything. Even if no, I'm cooperating. No, I'll break it off. No, that cannot happen. He can issue an order of seizure. Now coming to seizure, containing list of documents, goods and things seized separately. The goods can be released provisionally upon execution of a bond equal to value of goods, or furnishing a guarantee equal to the tax, interest, penalty and late fees. So in situations of hazardous and perishable nature, they are depreciable with the passage of time, constraints in storage space, goods may be disposed of. Once goods are seized, a show cause notice is to be issued within 6 months, failing which goods shall be returned to the person. Alright. Where goods are not produced on demand, guarantee will be encashed. Alright. Copies, documents seized can be made in the presence of authorized officer. Let us make sense of this seizure, man. What is seizure? So I can just seize those documents. In the process of search, I will make a list. I find all these documents, I find all these books of accounts. So I make a list of what all I am seizing. So good, nature of goods, quantity, description, unit wise value, perceived value. So all of the information will be in the list. So what all am I seizing? I will give a list to the person whose premises I am searching, and I will keep a copy with him. I'll take a signature of his saying that he agrees to the fact that so these are being seized. So I will issue an order of seizure containing the list of goods, documents, things seized separately. Now once the goods are seized, a list is given to him, an order of seizure is issued. A show cause notice has to be issued to him, that guy, within 6 months within 6 months. If no show cause notice is, so the show cause notice is nothing but asking for a written representation, his reply to combat the seizure. So why should I not seize the goods? Why should I not dispose of the goods which have been seized? So that is the question. You have to reply giving your own reasons. So if this notice is not issued within 6 months of seizure, then he has to return the goods back. All right. The goods can be provisionally relied upon. The goods can be provisional okay. Now when can he release the goods? I want release of goods when I execute a bond equal to the tax payable on the goods seized, tax interest payable on the goods seized. So then he will release a bond. I will also have to execute a guarantee equal to the same amount. Only then he will release the goods provisionally. So in case of hazardous goods or goods which will depreciate over time, if I do not put them to use, or if I do not sell them, their value depreciates drastically. If there are constraints in storage space for the department, so all their godown, all their offices are full of goods which have been seized. So in that case, he can sell it off, but before selling it off, an opportunity of being heard should be definitely given. So what if my documents are seized? Do I have an option to make copies of the documents which have been seized? Of course, you have option of making copies, but it has to be in the presence of authorized officer. And also, if that proper officer has reasons to believe that taking copies of documents is prejudicially affecting the revenue in the proceeding which is going on, he might deny making copies also. He has to have solid ground for that. So this is what a seizure is. Now, no search can be conducted without a valid search warrant, which shall be signed by the person in charge, along with 2 witnesses before the start of search. So once a search is issued, a search warrant is definitely required as per the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. What does this mean? Once the officer visits your house, he has to show your search warrant, otherwise you should not let him in. The search team shall also consist of lady officers, because if I have to search a lady, a gent cannot search a lady within the house. Only lady officer can search the lady. So for that, lady officers are also required. The officers before starting the search should disclose their identity by showing ID cards. The search should be done by at least 2 independent witnesses of the locality. If no inhabitants are available, the inhabitants of any other locality should be asked to search. So at least 2 witnesses should be there accompanying the search, and those 2 witnesses should be of the same locality, because those people are trusted people of the locality. If there are no persons of that nature in that locality, I can go for a nearby locality. I cannot call a person from Delhi for witnessing a search in Telangana. So it has to be a nearby locality. Before the start of search, they should offer themselves for personal search to the person in charge. So before searching them, you have to offer yourself to search first. The officer will just raise his hands or just put it like this and will ask the person in charge to search him. So what, from a taxpayer's point of view, what will you search? You should search that there is no video camera. You should search that there is no harmful objects. Alright. You should ask for a search warrant. You should see their ID cards. So all of these need to be searched. So he should offer himself for search. A panchanama of the proceedings along with annexure containing list of goods, documents, things seized should be signed by witness, person in charge along with the officer authorized for conducting search. So a panchanama of proceedings along with annexure containing list of goods, documents should be signed by witness. So what should be the contents of a search warrant? So that search warrant, the officer shows what should it contain, what is the violation as per the act, what premises is being searched, name and designation of the officer authorized to search, name and designation of the issuing officer with full designation along with round seal, date and place of issue, serial number of the search warrant, period of validity. So the search warrant should contain what is the premise being searched, alright, who is the officer that is authorized to search, who is the authorizing officer along with designation and common seal of the department, date and place of issue, what is the date of issue of search warrant, what is the place of issue of search warrant, Hyderabad date you write now, serial number of the search warrant and period of validity. That is also crucial. If you have to check the validity of search warrant, has it expired? The validity of search warrant should also be mentioned in the search warrant itself. Now, so this is search and seizure, man. Let us recapitulate once. So once, if when can this guy search, man? This guy can search. See, basic premise is I'm finding something. I want something from your house or premises. Be it books of accounts which are evidence for certain proceedings which are being carried out, or goods which have evaded tax. Maybe that is what I'm looking for. So I want something, that is why I conduct a search. A joint commissioner or a person above him can conduct or order a search. So he will issue an order in writing to search the place of business. So coming to, so he can forcefully break the almirahs and all if he is not cooperative. One thing in case of seizure is he will give you a list of what all items he is seizing. Within 6 months of seizure, he has to issue a show cause notice to you. That show cause notice, if it is not issued, that goods or whatever things documents has been seized has to be returned back to you. You can clearly make copies of the documents seized with the jurisdiction, with the permission, or in the presence of an authorized officer. The goods will be released provisionally if you submit a bond to that amount of tax, if you furnish a guarantee to the amount of tax. Alright, in case of hazardous nature of goods, or goods being of such nature that they will depreciate in value quickly if not sold, in case of constraint in storage space, they can be sold off but with an opportunity of being heard. Okay, now the procedure is the search warrant should be there, the officer should offer themselves for search, a lady officer should be there, at least 2 witnesses of the local area should be there, if not a nearby local location, a panchnama of the proceedings. So all whatever is happening should be recorded line by line along with an annexure of goods documents seized. Now the search warrant should contain the date of search, the validity of search, the officer authorized to conduct search, the officer authorizing along with the designation, date and place of issue. Now arrest, man. This is the final, very critical. If you go to this juncture, you've done something very wrong. So when can an arrest happen and who can do that? Very interesting. The commissioner, see, we are back to the commissioner again. So the ultimate authority, because this is the ultimate penalty that one can levy, the commissioner really has to be involved. There's no going back. The commissioner may authorize an officer to arrest a person if he has reasons to believe that the officer has committed an offence under 132 1A, 132 subsection 1 clause A to clause D. So what is this 132 1 clause A? So 132 1A clause A to clause D give situations where one invoice has been issued but goods have not been delivered. This is a bogus transaction. No goods delivery, just for claiming credit I might have done this. Second one, okay, the goods have gone but no invoice is issued. This is again the transaction itself is out of the net. So I'm evading tax in this case also. So this is a second case. So where the person who is receiving the goods in any of the 2 cases has claimed credit. So that is also one of the case. Tax not paid. So the final case is tax is not paid. offense could be cognizable and non-bailable, and non-cognizable and bailable. What does this mean? Cognizable is something I can just arrest you without an arrest warrant. Alright, generally an arrest warrant has to be taken. Only after that you can proceed to arrest. Arrest warrant from the court or magistrate has to be taken, only then an arrest can happen. So without an arrest warrant you can directly arrest. That is cognizable. And non-bailable, no bail because of the severity of the offense. Non-cognizable means you can arrest only if there is an arrest warrant and it is bailable offense. You can get out of jail on bail. The arrested person should be taken to the magistrate within 24 hours. Alright. In case of non-cognizable bailable offense, the assistant or deputy commissioner shall be treated as the person in charge of the police station and will have the power to release him on bail. In case of a cognizable and non-bailable offense, only the magistrate has the power to consider the bail. Decision to arrest needs to be taken after considering the following factors. What are the factors? To ensure proper investigation of the offense, to prevent such person from absconding. They are masterminds or key operators effecting proxy or binami imports exports in the name of dummy non-existent persons, where the intent to evade duty is evident and element of mens rea or guilty mind is certain or palpable or definite, clearly visible from the evidence. Prevention of possibility of tampering with evidence, intimidating or influencing witness, large amounts of evasion of tax. So now let us look at arrest. What is arrest? Who can issue an arrest warrant? An officer not below the rank of commissioner. Now commissioner comes back again. He has reasons to believe that an offense under 132 1A to D has happened. No invoice but goods have been sent. Invoice has been issued but no goods have been sent. Tax has been collected but not paid to the government. ITC has been claimed unlawfully in the situations mentioned. So in that cases, only he can issue an arrest. He can authorize an officer to arrest. So once this authorization is given, that person can go and directly arrest him. Alright, there are two kinds of offenses: cognizable and bailable, cognizable and non-bailable, and non-cognizable and bailable. Cognizable means without an arrest warrant that person can be arrested. Non-cognizable and bailable. What does this mean? It means that it can be, so this person can be bailed out. The arrested person should be taken to the magistrate. Now once an arrest happens, that person needs to be taken to the magistrate within 24 hours, or he has to be produced before the court within 24 hours. In case of a bailable or a non-cognizable offense, so it is a smaller offense, so the assistant or deputy commissioner has the power to grant bail. He will be treated as the magistrate. In case of a non-cognizable and non-bailable offense, he has to be taken to the magistrate or the court compulsorily. The assistant and deputy commissioner will not have the power to grant bail. Understand? So for deciding to arrest or not, these are the factors the commissioner has to take into account. So the seriousness of the offense is something that needs to be considered. Like so an arrest of this person is definitely required so that the proceedings happen smoothly. Otherwise he is affecting the witness or he is tampering with something, so that this person does not run away like Vijay Mallya. These are masterminds of or proxy people who are affecting binami imports or exports in the name of non-existent persons. These are the main people who are carrying out transactions in the name of someone else, in the name of binamis, where the intent to evade is clearly visible. Prevention of possibility of tampering with evidence. So this guy will tamper the evidence. He will influence the witness. So these are the so the amount of tax that is supposed to be evaded or is prospective evasion of tax is a huge amount. In that case, in these cases, the commissioner has to decide on the arrest. Based on these factors, he has to decide whether an arrest warrant has to be issued or not. Alright. So this is what an arrest is, section 69. Now what is a summons? Section 70. A proper officer may issue summons on any person requiring his physical presence in the course of any inquiry, and also require him to produce evidence or documents. Similar to a search, I want something from him. I want documents, goods which have evaded tax. I want documents or goods which have evaded tax, or I want, in case of summons, the primary thing is I want some information that he has. I want him to say it out of his mouth or give the documentary evidence. So that the primary purpose is interaction more than getting things from him. The primary purpose for summons is having a physical face-to-face interaction so that I get some information which is really useful for me in the proceedings. So that is the difference between a summon and an inspection. So me calling for a summon means that he needs something from me personally. The information needs to be coming out of my mouth, or some kind of, he wants some kind of information from me. That is the primary purpose. A proper officer may issue summons requiring his physical presence in course of any inquiry, and also require him to produce any evidence or documents. The person is bound to appear before the officer and to tender evidence. So I cannot say no. I can attend the summons myself, or I can send an authorized representative to appear on my behalf. If the person does not appear or avoids service of summons, or does not give evidence, gives false evidence, he would be liable for prosecution under IPC, also liable for penalty up to 25,000 rupees as per the GST law. So what does this mean? When I go for a summon, just imagine what can he ask? What can happen, man? I will not attend. That is one violation. I attend, but I give him false information. That is one more thing I can do. I give him documents, or I do not give him documents. So that is one more thing I can do. So I avoid going there. I do not give evidence, give false evidence. Then I am liable for prosecution under the Indian Penal Code itself. The GST law, under the general penalty, I will also be subject to 25,000 rupees penalty. Summons are the last resort where assessees are not cooperating and should not be issued to the top management. So this is the last resort. I've done the search, I've done the inspection, I've done the seizure. A summon should, because a summon requires a person to be physically present. So this should not be issued to the top management. The CEO or CFO should not be bothered by the summons. Only the finance manager should be issued the summons. So the language should not say the RAO, ABAO, come here. No, it should be plain and simple, and should not be in such a manner that it causes a mental harassment to the receiver of the notice or summons. Summons should be issued after obtaining prior written permission of the officer not below the rank of assistant commissioner. So here the surprising thing is just the assistant commissioner and above can issue summons. It is very convenient, no? The officer has to submit a report or record a brief of proceedings to the officer authorizing summons. So if there are two people involved, one authorizing summons and one issuing the summons, so a report by the person who actually conducted the summons, a report of the proceedings should be given to the officer authorizing summons. So now, to ensure proper investigation of the offence, okay, not this one. Precautions while issuing summons. A summons should be issued for appearance where it is not justified. The power to summon can be exercised only when there is an inquiry being undertaken. Just plainly, I cannot issue a summon. Normally, summons should not be issued repeatedly, but if you look at inspection, you can, if you have reasons to believe that those things are happening. The ITC excess claimed, the goods have been secreted. So all of those reasons, if they are present, I can just go for an inspection. But for someone, there has to be an inquiry which is already happening. Only then I can issue a summon. Normally, summon should not be issued repeatedly. Just one summon should be issued, and one appearance, he should get all the information that he needs and close it off. He cannot just keep calling people repeatedly. He should not be asked to wait for a long period of time unless it is a matter of strategy in order to irritate them so that they get the information out of them. Like this drug abuse case that was happening with the Tollywood celebrities, they were made to wait for a long period of time so that they get agitated and probably tell the truth. Preferably, statements should be recorded during office hours. So mostly keep it in such a way that they are called during office hours. Access to premises. The proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner shall have access to the place of business of the registered person. They can inspect the documents. So any person, the proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner, can inspect the premises, books, documents, computer software. So the person who is in charge of the premises, it is his duty to give the required documents. The required documents are maintained by the registered person. So the documents are maintained by the registered person: trail balance, annual financial accounts, cost audit report, and any other records. All of these has to be given to him. Officers of police, railways, customs, village officers engaged in collection of land revenue can also be the assistance of these people can also be taken by the joint commissioner or person authorized by the joint commissioner to inspect the premises. All right. So this is what summons is. Finally, summons can be issued only when an inquiry is happening, not below the rank of a person of joint commissioner. So summon only middle level management, not the top management, as far as practicable. Keep it during office hours. Ensure that the summons are closed in one go. Always maintain a record of the proceedings. The person who is actually carrying out the summons has to report to the authorizing officer of the proceedings that have happened in the summons. So now let us look at something very important practically as well as for an exam point of view. Section 73 and 74. So 73 and 74. So when tax is not paid, short paid, erroneously refunded, excess ITC availed for reasons other than fraud, willful misstatement, suppression of facts, then a show cause notice under section 73 will be issued. But now the procedure has changed. Initially, before the issue of show cause notice itself, an initial statement is sent saying that, so this is the tax that needs to be paid according to me because so and so. If you do not reply, then I will issue a show cause notice. So another filter is being added. So now let us look at the actual procedure. So if tax is not paid, short paid, erroneously refunded for reasons other than fraud, willful misstatement, suppression of facts, a notice under 73 is issued. Now, order to be issued. Now, what is the so show cause notice is issued. I furnish a reply to the show cause notice. So if I'm satisfied, the proceedings are dropped. If I'm not satisfied, then an order has to be issued within 3 years from the due date of furnishing annual return for the financial year to which tax amount pertains or date of erroneous refund. Show cause notice should be at least issued 3 months before due date for order. That means the maximum time limit for issue of show cause notice is 2 years and 9 months. So 2 years 9 months from the due date of furnishing annual return for the financial year to which this section 73 SCN pertains to, I have to issue a show cause notice. Now let us take one more situation. Let us say I receive a show cause notice for March 2019, saying that I have not paid tax. So for the same period, or let us say for September 2018, during the same financial year 18-19, I noticed that for the same reason tax has not been paid in September 2018 month also. The grounds are the same. So do I need to issue another show cause notice? No. It says that just issue a statement giving details, and that statement itself will be treated as a show cause notice under section 73(1). This is 73 subsection 3. So this says that do not issue a show cause notice again. Just give a small statement. That statement itself shall be deemed to be a show cause notice under section 73(1). So period within which tax is to be paid. A statement under 73 subsection 3 can be issued instead of a show cause notice. That itself will be deemed to be a show cause notice under 73(1). Now, what is it about penalties? So if I pay before the issue of show cause notice, I don't need to pay any penalty. If I pay tax along with interest, no penalty needs to be paid. No penalty, and proceeding shall be deemed to be concluded. Alright. Now what if after issue of show cause notice, I make the payment? Now, even if after issue of show cause notice, but before issue of the order, I make the payment, then even in that case, no penalty is required if I pay tax and interest and intimate to the proper officer that I have made the payment. Alright, now if tax is paid within 30 days of issue of order, then a penalty of 10% of the tax involved required to be paid, or 10,000, whichever is higher. So understand, penalty is only coming here when I pay after the issue of the final order under 73. Only after issue of order within 30 days or more, if I pay, within 30 days if I pay, then 10% of penalty. If it is beyond 30 days, then a penalty equal to the tax actually that is required to be paid needs to be paid along with tax and interest. So the final chance for him to have a reduced penalty is within 30 days from the date of issue of order under section 73. Before the issue of order under 73, if I make the payment, then no penalty at all will be levied under 73. However, there is a catch situation here. If I collect the tax and do not pay to the government, in any case, in case of self-assessed tax which is required to be paid by me, but which is not paid, then the penalty of 10% is definitely required to be paid. Forget ITC. If there is a tax which has been collected by me, which is self-assessed but not paid to the government, then 10% penalty needs to be compulsorily paid no matter what. Even before issue of show cause notice, if I pay, even before issue of order I pay, I need to pay 10% penalty. Understood? So let us say input credit, I've availed excess and erroneously I have paid tax less. In this case, this will not apply. If I make the payment before issue of show cause notice, or if I make the payment before issue of order under within 30 days of issue of before issue of order under section 73, no penalty will be levied. So 73 is for tax not paid, short paid, erroneously refunded because of reasons other than fraud, willful misstatement, suppression of facts. So 74 is ditto, but the only change is if it is for reasons of fraud, willful misstatement, suppression of facts. Therefore, the only difference we have to learn is penalties. So the rest is the same. The period is 5 years instead of 3, and the time limit for issue of show cause notice is at least 6 months before the issue of order. That means 4 years 6 months is the time limit for issue of show cause notice under section 74. A statement can also be issued under instead of a show cause notice if it is for the same grounds but for reasons other than fraud, willful misstatement. Then instead of issuing a show cause notice under 73(1), I can just issue a, so listen, so I issued a notice under 74(1) because there is fraud, willful misstatement and there are some grounds. So in the same year, for the same grounds other than fraud, willful misstatement, I found the tax is not paid. Instead of issuing another show cause notice under 73(1), because here there is no fraud, willful misstatement, instead of issuing a no show cause notice under 73(1), the show cause notice under 74 itself is treated as a show cause notice under 73(1) for the second offense that I have noticed. Understood? Let us say in March I issue a notice under 74 for some grounds because of fraud, willful misstatement. In September 2018, I found another mistake where tax needs to be paid, but it is not for fraud, willful misstatement. So instead of issuing a show cause notice under 73, the show cause notice issued under 74 itself shall be deemed to be the show cause notice under 73 for September 19, only if I can just only issue a statement giving details. Now penalty, if I pay before issue of show cause notice, then I need to pay a penalty of 15% along with tax and interest. If I pay before the issue of order, then I need to pay a penalty of 25% of the tax along with tax and interest, and proceeding shall be deemed to be concluded. Now if I pay the tax within 30 days of the issue of order, then penalty equal to 50% of the tax needs to be paid. Now 75, where court has stayed the issue of notice under 73 or 74, the period of stay shall be excluded for calculation of the 3 years or 5 years. Where the appellate tribunal or court concludes that, look, where because we know 3 years and 5 years is the time limit for issue of order. Now the person is applied for a stay of issue of order, the period of stay shall be excluded from calculating the period for issue of order under 73 or 74. Where appellate tribunal or order concludes that notice is not sustainable because the grounds of willful misstatement, suppression of facts could not be established, then the officer shall continue to determine tax under 73(1). It is not that the proceeding shall be deemed to be concluded. The proceedings under 73(1) will continue. Interest tax should not exceed the amount mentioned in the notice. So the initial show cause notice that I issue, the grounds and the tax amount should not exceed that mentioned in the initial show cause notice. So the proper officer from his point of view has to be very careful. He cannot add additional grounds later, and he cannot add the amount of tax later that is not mentioned in the show cause notice. Interest is payable. That is why if you notice, first an inspection, search or seizure is conducted only after gathering all the evidence. He will proceed under 73 or 74. Understand? If order is not passed under 73 or 74 within 3 or 5 years, the proceeding shall be deemed to be concluded. Alright, interest is payable, okay. Whether penalty is imposed or not, no penalty shall be imposed for the same act. Okay, once penalty under 73 or 74 is imposed, no other penalty can be imposed. He cannot say that, okay, 73, 74 penalty you paid, also pay the general penalty of 25,000. That he cannot say. Once penalty under 73 or 74 is imposed and paid, no further penalty can be levied. Section 76. Now, let us say any person collects an amount representing tax, whether supplies are taxable or not, but does not pay to the government. So I collect the tax but do not pay to the government. Whether tax is payable or not, a show cause notice will be issued to me as to why a tax and penalty equal to the tax should not be paid. So I will give my representation, right, as I would. And I can also request for a personal hearing. After a hearing representation, a speaking order shall be passed giving facts along with the basis shall be passed within 1 year of receipt of notice. No time limit for, so this does not have, this is eternal. Even if you die, there is no time limit. So a person collects tax, does not pay to the government, a notice can be issued at any time, but once the notice is issued, it has to be concluded within 1 year from the receipt of notice. So this is something as a precautionary measure, this section. After considering representations, a speaking order giving facts along with basis for decision will be given. If an appellate tribunal or court stays the order, then period of stay shall be excluded from the period of calculating 1 year. Any excess amount shall be refunded to the person who has borne incidents otherwise credited to the Consumer Welfare Fund. Now let us look at section 77. Now I paid IGST instead of paying CGST and SGST, or I paid CGST and SGST where I need to pay IGST. In that case, what do I need to do? I need to, let us take the first case, I paid IGST instead of CGST, SGST. Now pay the CGST, SGST in cash and claim a refund of the IGST paid. That is one thing. Now CGST, SGST is paid instead of IGST. Now pay the IGST and claim a refund of the CGST, SGST later. Or you've paid CGST, SGST instead of IGST, pay IGST and claim a refund of CGST, SGST. Without interest, you don't need to pay interest. That is the thing here. That is the crucial thing here. And you cannot adjust it. Let us say this month I made the mistake of treating intra as interstate supply. Next month, let us say you have to pay 5 lakhs as IGST. You cannot say that I will pay next month a lesser amount because last month I paid excess tax. That you cannot do. You have to pay the correct tax amount and claim a refund of the erroneous tax you paid. That is that will affect the cash flows of the taxpayers. But the provision says this is the procedure. Recovery proceedings can be initiated when the order for payment has been passed and payment is not made within 3 months of. Now, when can recovery? Okay, tax determination has been done powerfully. Everything is great. Now, how can he recover and when can he recover? What are the modes? So, the recovery can be done only when within 3 months from the passing of order under 73, 74, or be it an order passed in 62 or 63. If payment is not made within 3 months from the date of order, from date of receipt of order, only then recovery proceedings can be initiated. Alright. So, how do I recover? Section 79. The amount can be deducted by the proper officer from the amount domain. One way is, let us say some amount is due to that guy, a refund is due to him. Just like under 245, a notice is issued under income tax, a notice is issued under GST also. He will deduct the amount that is due to him as a refund and he will remit the remaining amount to him. That is one way he can recover. Detaining the goods and selling the goods belonging to him in e-auction. So what happens is, an e-auction happens, a notice is given to the defaulter saying that your goods which are seized will be sold off in this e-auction on so and so date. Before that, if you make the payment, the auction will be cancelled off. So on saying that the e-auction is invited, bids are invited, at least 15 days bids are invited. The successful bidders on the date of auction are awarded the goods. Now a security deposit is conducted from all the bidders. Successful bidders are refunded the amount, unsuccessful bidders are refunded the amount. Successful bidders, if they fail to make payment, the deposit is encashed. A notice is given for e-auction to the defaulter and inviting bids, the last date of which should not be earlier than 15 days of date of notice. So last date for, if I am a bidder, the last date for raising a bid should not be earlier than 15 days of the notice. So at least the time gap between the notice date and the time for closure of bids should be at least 15 days. A pre-receipt deposit is collected and returned back to the unsuccessful bidders and encashed in case of successful bidders who default. If the amount is paid in full before the date of deduction, the auction shall be called off. The successful bidder on payment of the amount shall be given possession of the goods and a sales certificate shall be issued. He shall be given a notice within 15 days of auction. In case no bids, okay. So what does this mean? So ultimately an e-auction is called all the bidders successful from everyone deposits are invited. The pre-deposit is kept for successful bidders who default, and for unsuccessful bidders the deposit amount is refunded back to them. And in the next case, once the bid happens and one person gets awarded, right, the person who has the highest bid will be awarded the auction. Within 15 days of the auction, he will be intimated of him being selected for his bid being accepted. Within 15 days, the intimation has to go. So once this happens, a certificate of sale is given by the department to the successful bidder. So the defaulter is no longer having the title to the goods. Any excess surplus proceedings will be refunded back to the defaulter. Direct a third party by way of notice from whom amount is due to the defaulter or becomes due at a later date. So let us say X Limited is the defaulter of GST. Now Y Limited has to give some money to X Limited. Now the department will send a notice to Y Limited saying that you do not give the money to X, you give it to us. Or let us say X Limited has deposits in fixed deposits in a bank account. Normally the bank would give a fixed deposit encashment only on production of a fixed deposit receipt, right? So in this case, the fixed deposit receipt is also not required. The department can directly send a notice to the bank, and the bank has to encash the deposits in the name of the government. So it is that critical, this provision. So amount is due to the defaulter or becomes due at a later date. Maybe on 1st of next month, the amount becomes due. The notice will say that whenever it becomes due, you credit it to our account number is so and so. Amount held in trust of the defaulter or would be held at a later date. Maybe the deposits would come for encashment at a future date. So in that case, give me, whenever you hold the proceedings in your name, when the deposit limit has or the time for encashment has come, then you will be holding the money in trust, right? Then you give that money to us. A notice will be sent directing him to make payment specifying any discharge of the amount would be deemed to be. Now the notice will also say two things. The discharge of the amount would be discharge of any discharge of the amount by the bank would be discharged with the consent of the defaulter. So the consent problem is not there, the notice will say. Any discharge would be discharge of his liability. His liability for, let us say, 5 crore deposit is over. The liability to the defaulter is discharged. The bank should not worry. The bank should not worry about his consent. The bank should not worry about their liability. Their liability is discharged. It is with the consent of the defaulter. So that is what the notice should mention to evoke trust, right? So that is what the notice mentions. Every person is bound to, so that bank or the third party has to comply, otherwise he will be treated as a defaulter and all the proceedings can be initiated against him as if he is the defaulter. If he proves that the amount is, and also if I prove that I don't need to pay to the defaulter, or amount is will not be held in trust by me now or any time in the future, then I don't need to make any payment. Now one more mode of recovery is auctioning of immovable property. So it is the same as auctioning of the goods. I invite an e-auction. So the only difference is I send a notice to the registrar of property in case of property, to the RTA office, saying that if he wants to sell this immovable property off, do not let him sell it off without our permission. So that is the only difference, otherwise it is the same. A list of goods is made, an order of disdain or attachment is issued, and notice of sale is issued prohibiting any other transaction with such property. If it remains unpaid within 30 days after seizure, he shall sell the property and satisfy the amount payable and render the surplus to such person. if within 30 days of seizing the goods no payment is made, I'll sell the property off and I'll take my tax. The balance amount will be refunded to him. So first, a list of goods that are being seized, detained is made, and an order of attachment or attachment for removable property, disdain or seizure for movable property is issued, and a notice of sale is issued prohibiting any other transaction with such property. A public notice is given. So if anyone says he is not the owner of property, I am the owner, he can come and give his contention. Send the order to the concerned revenue or transport authority and place charge. Same process is followed. Auction is called, pre-deposit is accepted. Unsuccessful bidders are refunded the deposit amount. Successful bidders, if they default to make payment, then their bid is encashed, deposit is encashed. In case of the property being seized is shares, I can sell it off instead of an auction through a broker. The broker will deduct his commission and pay the balance amount off. If an objection is raised by a third person saying that I am the owner of the property, then if he proves to the satisfaction of the proper officer, then the property or goods shall be released to him. So he has to show the evidence that on the date of issue of notice of seizure, I am the owner. So that is what he has to prove. If he proves it that after that date he is the owner, I will not consider it. On the date of notice, he has to prove that he is the owner. He had some interest. Okay, if he is satisfied that property is not in the possession of the defaulter. Okay, property is in the possession of the defaulter, but I just put it in his name as a temporary thing because I am an NRI. I cannot hold property in India, or I am an NRI. For convenience sake, I just held the property in his name because the power of attorney and all is not available. So if I can prove that, then it is okay. The property will be released. It is in possession, in trust of someone else. He is a trustee of this property for the benefit of a minor. In that case also, this property cannot be sold off. The proper officer shall prepare a certificate and send it to the collector of the district in which he owns property or has place of business and require him. Now one more mode of recovery. So this is one mode of recovery, auctioning of movable, immobile property. One more mode is, I will send a notice to the collector of the district in which the defaulter has a place of business or has his residence or holds any immobile property, and I will ask him to collect the tax from him as if it was arrears of land revenue. Arrears of land revenue, if they are initiated, you have to forget everything that is there in your house. Everything they'll come and take it away by force. So in that manner, he will intimate the collector and ask him to collect the tax. I can also make an application to the court asking the court to collect the amount as if it was an arrear of the fine imposed by the court. The court will take its appropriate actions. The amount recovered, if it is less than the amount due, such amount shall be credited to the accounts of central government and state government in proportion of the amount. So let us say 5 lakhs is due, 3 lakhs to the central, 10 lakhs is due, 6 lakhs to the central and 4 lakh to the state government. Now I collect 1 lakh only. So this 1 lakh should be credited to the center and state in the proportion of 6:4. That is what he says. The commissioner on an application made may grant payment. So an application can be made for payment in installments also for a maximum period not exceeding 24 months. He can grant only when the following conditions are satisfied. What are those? In any of the previous years an application is made and it has been rejected, then now I will not grant an application for installment. In the previous year, if I made an application, it has to be accepted. If it was rejected in any of the preceding financial year, I will not grant an application for payment in installments now. Alright. Any recovery proceedings are pending against such person, I will not allow him to make payment in installments or make a deferred payment along with interest. the amount outstanding is less than 25,000. Even in that case, even if one installment has not been paid, the entire amount becomes due once the payment by installments is accepted. If even one installment you do not pay in time, the entire outstanding amount becomes due the moment you default in one installment, along with the interest. A person who is required to pay tax, interest, penalty, who creates charge on property or parts with the property by a sale exchange with an intention to defraud the government of its revenue. So, as I told you before, the moment I get a notice, I transfer my property to someone else. So, the transfer would be void unless it is in good faith, it is for adequate consideration. Without, the person who is buying is not aware that all this notices or proceedings are happening. With the or forget these three conditions. If I take the permission of the proper officer for selling this property, he accepts it, then fair enough. First charge shall be on the property of such taxable person which overrides any other act except the IBC law. Now, the charge will be on the property of that person as per the GST law. Forget any other law, only the IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, will prevail over the GST law. So, if you have to pay income tax, GST, property tax, the property realization due amount will be first used for payment of GST. Understand? Then any other tax. But IBC, the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, will prevail over the GST law. Provisional attachment, what is this? Now, if he feels that, if he has reasons to believe that it is in the interest of the revenue to provisionally attach the property or bank account so that he does not sell it further and he cannot make any debits to the bank account, the commissioner, now in case of payment of tax in installments or provisional attachment, there has to be a commissioner authorizing this. In case of pendency of proceedings under 62-63, that means taxpayer has not registered himself or taxpayer has not scrutiny under 62. Intimation shall be sent to the registrar or bank or RTA. Okay, one of the client has actually not filed the return for a couple of months and a provisional attachment of the bank account was made. The intimation shall be sent to the registrar or bank who shall place encumbrance on the property or bank account. Taxable person shall raise an objection within 7 days of provisional attachment. So the taxable person can submit a reply within 7 days. In case of hazardous goods, if the person does not pay, then the commissioner can dispose of such goods and recover the amount. Provisional attachment shall, so this order of provisional attachment will not have effect after 1 year from the date of order. Enhancement or reduction of demandment. Any amount payable way of tax, interest, penalty in respect of an order of demand has been, so let us say a demand order has been raised under 73 or 74 and later I make an appeal, the department goes for an appeal and the amount, let us say 5 lakhs is payable by me as per an order. The appellate tribunal says 6 lakhs is payable by you, the amount has been enhanced, right? So the process that has happened is show cause notice was issued for me for 5 lakhs, demand order was given at 5 lakhs. Now the tribunal says pay 6 lakhs. So 1 extra lakh has been added to the tax that is required to be paid by me. So for this 1 lakh, this section says issue a new show cause notice for this additional tax payable. Alright. The commissioner shall issue a fresh notice to the extent of the enhanced amount and the recovery proceedings in respect of tax due before the issue of order by the tribunal shall stand to continue from the stage they stood immediately before disposal of the appeal. The previous proceedings will continue from the stage they were immediately before disposal of appeal. So if the dues are now 5 lakhs payable has become 3 lakhs, now no fresh show cause notice is required to be issued, just an intimation along with the appropriate authority, recovery proceedings shall continue from the stage as they stood immediately before disposal. So this is what assessment, audit, inspection, search and seizure, recovery is all about. So this is what our discussion is today. We've finished assessment, audit, we've finished inspection, search and seizure, we've finished recovery. So next class we'll finish off GST and we'll look at customs and foreign trade policy. Thank you very much.